Wear Orange Wednesday, Limb Loss Awareness Month. I'm going to give y'all a couple minutes to jump on board, and we're going to have a great evening. Lots of good stuff to talk about this evening. I'm going to enjoy my well-earned icy Diet Coke for this evening as I wait for you guys to jump on board. Good stuff right there. All right. So for those of you watching the replay, as always, I love to know who my audience is. So don't be shy. Let me know that you're watching the replay by putting replay into the comments. And also, if you have any questions, I always do go back and kind of read through the questions and comments afterwards just to see if I missed anything there. And I see a few people popping on board. Happy Wednesday to you, Ashley. And I got your question just in the nick of time. Girl, you are lucky. I'm going to get that question to you tonight. All right. Who else we got on board? We got Brian Bishop, no bustelo, in rehab after the revision. How are you doing from that, my friend? How is that going? No, John, you're actually watching this. You're watching this one live, bud. Hey there, Tom. Glad you could join in. All right, we got a few people jumping on board. All right, I am just kind of queuing up my questions here, making sure I've got everything in one spot. It's been a crazy, crazy month. Hey, Adam, glad you could join in. Awesome. All right, we got a good crew jumping on board this evening. All right, guys. So you guys like sick of seeing my face? I know I've been going live every single day this month for Limb Loss Awareness Month. It's been a lot of fun. Yes, John, you are live. Hey, comadre. Yes, today is an extra special day for me. Today is the 14-year anniversary that I became a mom for the second time. So that's my complicated way of saying it's my second daughter's 14th birthday today. So we were just celebrating with the family just now. Hey there, Denise. Hey, Pastor David is on board. Awesome. We got Winston. Hey, oh, you're so sweet, Winston. Thank you. Compadre. Oh, man, I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have you here. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. So guys, yeah, for those of you who haven't seen like the explosion on social media, it's kind of amazing. It is Limb Loss Awareness Month. April is Limb Loss Awareness Month. The color is orange. That's why you're kind of seeing the hashtag WOW, Wear Orange Wednesday. We've had a beautiful campaign going on between many of the companies in the O&P industry and I call it amputee world, that we've all been coming together to kind of work together to help bring awareness. I know for me, I'm doing the 30 days live. So each day I've been going live for just a couple minutes just to share a random fact about what it is to live with limb loss. And a lot of this is, you know, obviously it's information for you all, but my goal with these 30 days live is to bring awareness to all the rest of the community at large. And it's kind of been nice. I've had a lot of folks, some of your friends comment saying, wow, we didn't know this about amputees. And I know several of my own personal friends and connections that they've been listening to the videos going, we had no idea. So it's kind of nice. And it's also nice to see all of the companies coming in together. So tonight, I definitely want to give a shout out to the company responsible for these shirts. It's called the Liner Wand. I'm sure many of you have heard about their really great products for keeping the liners nice and clean. It's a really great product if you haven't already checked it out. I'm going to go ahead and type in their website. It's pretty easy. It's www.thelinerwand.com. Okay. Liz Stone and Brooke, they're kind of the two top dogs there at Liner Wand. They created and designed this shirt. And you'll notice it says 507. 507 are the number of new amputations done every day here in the United States, right? So the breakdown is 2 million amputees right now in the US living with limb loss. 185,000 new amputations per year, and that averages out to 507 new amputations per day. So if you've been seeing the number 507, that's where that is coming from. And guys, these shirts are really nice. They're really nice, and they're very nicely priced. The proceeds are going to help the Range of Motion Project and Camp No Limits. So if you want to be a cool kid and have a cool shirt like this one, go to linerwand.com and grab yourself one. I think they're really cool looking. I don't know. I think they did a really nice job designing these, right? Yes, they do sell the shirts. So go grab one, guys. They're a lot of fun. And it's been like a nice like conversation piece because I've been out and about in the community today and people are just kind of like, what's that number? So it really just, it is a conversation piece. All right, David. All right. Hey, Sandra. Oh, thank you, guys. I'm going to show my daughter these birthday wishes after the show is over. She'll appreciate that, guys. Thank you. We got Brett from Kansas on board. Let's see who else we got. Winston. Oh, thank you, Winston. I appreciate that. So, guys, not too many questions that came in today, but really good ones. And actually one, which I'm kind of glad. I like getting new stuff. Yeah, Brett, you got to get one now. I know. It's like the cool kid bar just keeps going up and up and up. Jody's wearing it as well. Okay, awesome, guys. So I should probably introduce myself for those of you who might be watching this for the first time, right? Who's the crazy lady? My name is Cosi. So I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. So if this is your first time coming to the show, welcome. As you can probably already tell from the comments section, I love to interact with the people that are watching. So don't be shy. Let me know who you are, where you're from, and what's in your mug or bottle, whatever it is that you're drinking from this evening. Good stuff. Okay, let's start answering a couple of these questions. Here's one. This one came from Mark. And Mark says, I have an interesting question. Of course you do, Mark. I've noticed that when standing, I often have to adjust my stance to put equal weight onto both legs. It seems that if I'm not naturally putting even weight on both legs, I typically start to favor my sound leg. I hope this makes sense. Have you ever heard of this? Yes. Oh, Ryan, you got your book. Yes, thank you. Guys, let me just pause for a moment. So I am selling these books on my website, right? And they're these, I like to think, really lovely books for below the knee and above the knee amputees. Tons of adapted exercise, like over 150 exercises and videos and everything like that. Many of you have been ordering my books, and I get my orders out within 24 hours of receiving your order. But I do just want to give you a heads up. The USPS system, God bless it, it's running just a touch slow. So some of you are getting your books within 3 days of my sending it out, and some of you are getting your books like 2 weeks later. So I've got all the tracking numbers, and I am keeping track of everything. So thank you for your patience and your understanding with that. I just want to kind of put it out there because I know I've had a couple people emailing me saying, I ordered my book 2 weeks ago. Where is it? And I go, well, it's tracking. It's coming. It's coming. All right, so back to the question. Mark is noticing that when he's standing, he's always having to adjust his stance because he keeps wanting to go over to his sound side. Guys, that's perfectly normal, even in folks with two anatomical legs. Our bodies were created to be symmetrical, right? If you split us down the middle, ideally we're going to be even on both sides. But in actual reality, we're always going to favor one side over the other, right? We're either right-handed favor or left-handed favor dominant. Right? And the same thing with our legs and everything like that. And there's going to be these minor differences that develop over our lifetime that we're going to favor one side over the other, right? So when it comes to using a prosthesis, there's definitely going to be a favoritism towards the stronger side, which is typically, not always, typically the anatomical leg, or some people call it the sound side, right? So this is very normal to happen, even during the gait cycle. That's why people like me have a career, right? Because we're trying to teach you how to walk symmetrically again using even weight on both sides. But that's not always going to be the case. Now, when I start with my patients, and let me see if I can do a shameless plug here on my book. When I start with my patients, whether they are advanced or whether they are, hang on, please hold. Oh, it's here somewhere. Whether they're advanced or whether they're beginners, I always take them back to the beginning with the square up exercise. Okay. And the whole point behind the square up exercise, okay, is to teach you how to start putting equal weight on both feet, right? And even for people who've been using a prosthesis for a really long time, many of them were never just taught that foundational basic right there. And I put them into this position, and all of a sudden they're just all over the place, and their body just has a tough time processing it. If you guys want me to show the video for this, put yes, show me in the comment section, and I can give you guys a sneak peek. So if y'all want to see a video of the square up and how to do that exercise, go ahead and put it into the comment section. All right. So that's the case. Oh, lots of yeses. I love it when you guys talk to me like that. All right, awesome. So, what Mark is doing, the fact that he's even aware of it is a very good thing. And the fact that he's constantly trying to adjust it in his daily activity is also a good thing. Because again, your sound leg is going to start getting a beating over and over and over again over the course of years if you keep letting it be the strong leg. Does that make sense? Guys, let me see if I can share my screen. Ooh, yes, Pastor Dave is getting his popcorn. All right. Jill, starting over would be helpful. Absolutely, Jill. And guys, I give this exercise to people when they have a new foot, when they get a new knee, when anything changes about their socket, because it just kind of reboots your system. So let me see, be patient with me for a moment. I'm going to share my screen. Did I get this right? Ooh, there it is. All right, here we go. So a lot of times folks hear me talk about the square up position, and you're going to see that referenced throughout the exercise manual and videos. This is the starting position. This is how you really start to learn to get familiar with your prosthesis. The average distance apart our feet should be 4 to 6 inches. It's really not a lot. And I always kind of joke around with my patients and say only John Wayne can make it look cool to stand with his legs really far apart. So this is where it all begins. This is where you start learning where your foot is in space and getting comfortable with it. So I'm going to do this with Robin. So when I have my patients square up, usually I'll stick my shoe in between their shoes. And you can have a family member help you out with this one. And I have them sandwich my foot in between their feet. And as you can see, she's doing a really good job of it. And she's keeping her toes nice and even. And then I'm going to remove my foot. And then what I have folks do is look down. That's how you learn proprioception. Through your visual, through your vestibular in your inner ear, and the little proprioceptors, those Pac-Man that you heard about in my earlier talk, that give that information back to your brain to let it know that it's there, that foot is there. So I'm going to have Robin look down. As she's looking down, her brain is going, oh look, there's a foot, and it's attached to my body, and it's doing a pretty good job of holding me up. This is where the trust in the prosthesis begins. And again, I have everybody return to starting position, to the square up position, and pretty soon it becomes an automatic thing, which is kind of what we want. Give it a try. Okay, did that go through, guys? Y'all got to let me know, because sometimes when I do share screen, I can't see my screen anymore, so I can't tell if it's working or not. So if y'all can be a thumbs up that you were able to hear that video. Yes, did it work? Okay. And then guys, for those of you who are, thank you guys, those of you who are my below the knee amputees, it's exactly the same way. It's absolutely the same way. So if you guys have purchased, those of you who have subscribed to my video program, which is what you just saw, that's under the balance section, phase 1 exercises. Okay. And those of you who have my book, both above the knee and below the knee, it's the same exact thing. It's balance section, phase 1. Okay. And then the cool thing is, guys, and this is how I do it with my patients, okay? When it comes to getting that weight onto that prosthetic side, you really do need to take this first step and start at the beginning, and then eventually progress yourself to the weight shifts. And these are also in the balance section, phase 1 here, and balance section, phase 1 in the video section, okay? These are things that when you start to train your brain, those first few weeks, especially those of you who are my newer amputees, it feels like my patients will tell me, I feel like my brain is turned on all the time. Do y'all ever feel that? That's probably one of the more interesting revelations that my patients have when they're first learning how to walk, is that they're like, why am I having to think about this all the time, right? Anybody else have that experience when they were learning to use a prosthesis? Right. And it's because, again, your brain is relearning this new skill. And that's a very normal thing, that in those first few weeks, sometimes even few months, depending on the level of amputation you have, you're going to be thinking about this all the time. And that's a good thing, because it means that over the course of time, it will eventually become on autopilot. Okay. So guys, this is something just to kind of keep in the back of your minds. And I always love kind of going back to the basics on this one. Yes. All right, awesome. We're going to move on to the next question. Guys, by the way, especially those of you who are my new folks here, if you have any questions, don't be shy. Put it in the comments section. Yes, Ryan, you're absolutely right. Every step is going to seem intentional. And it's kind of, it's mentally exhausting. Let's face it, right? Because sometimes you're just like, I just want to turn my brain off and not have to think about it so much. But again, it's one of those things. Yes, good question, Mark. Very good. But it's just one of those things that if you do it right from the beginning, or, even if you're starting over again, okay, you will see the results later on if you stay consistent with it, and it will become automatic again. And to me, it's just a fascinating way that the brain, we call it neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to kind of rewire itself after the brain has been injured, or after there's been an injury in the body itself, as to how it processes the environment around it. So kind kind of one of those really cool things. All right, guys, let's go to this next question. I'm going to take, you know what? I'm going to take Ashley's question. Ashley, hang on. I got your question here. So Ashley sent me a picture of her new prosthesis. Ashley, do you mind if you're able, I don't know if you're able to, I can't do it from my end, but if you can, if you're not, if you're okay, if you don't mind posting a picture of your prosthesis in the comments section. I don't even know if we're able to do that or not. But she's showing me a picture of her new prosthesis. It's really pretty. And it's got a suction one-way valve. Okay. So suction is basically a form of suspension, how the prosthesis is stuck onto your leg and how it stays, how it's suspended onto your residual limb, right? And we have several different ways of suspending the socket onto the residual limb. And one of them is called suction suspension, right? So usually the way it works is that the prosthetist might put a little valve at the bottom of the socket itself. It's like a little circle valve. Yeah, I don't even know how to do it myself, actually. So the way it works is you put your residual limb in, and once you feel like your limb is kind of under there, you kind of stick your finger in the little hole and you kind of see, okay, is my limb down far enough? You put the little valve in, okay, and you tighten it up. It's usually like a little lefty-loosey, righty-tighty type thing. And then you start pushing down with your limb and then pushing the button to let the air escape, right? So it's basically pushing all of the air out of your socket to create a negative pressure system. And the whole point of that is to like basically saran wrap your leg into that socket and make it a nice snug fit. Okay. So that's kind of how it works. The first few times you put it on, especially if you're having any trouble with your fine motor, those of you who might have neuropathy in your fingers might have a little trouble with this in the beginning, to screw in that little part of the valve and making sure that it's lined up properly, so that you can get a good seal that way. Yeah, I've never seen pictures in live chat either myself, but I know a lot of you will have this particular system. But that's basically how it works. And just like anything new with your prosthesis, you just got to kind of troubleshoot a little bit. I see some of my patients, they'll just do the little amputee dance and they'll, jump into their socket and push the air out and you hear the air going out and you see them go into the socket. Okay. Marianne says, mine is called crap. Marianne, you crack me up, darling. Winston asks, do you work with a lot of soldiers who lost their limbs? Yes, but not necessarily soldiers who lost their limb while in theater, in active duty. And this is something that usually surprises people. A lot of my, friends and family in the community, they assume that the amputees I work with are all soldiers coming back from the Middle East. And it's actually a very small percentage of amputees in general that are from our soldiers. 54% of amputees are actually due to vascular related problems. So diabetes, peripheral vascular disease, peripheral arterial disease. And then the other 45% are due to trauma. And within that 45%, we have our veterans, we have our motor vehicle accidents, which actually is a bigger percentage, right? And then 2% is our cancer population, usually some flavor of osteosarcoma, right? Now, the veterans I typically work with, they usually lose their limbs well after they've retired from the military, and they lose their limbs due to vascular disease. So yes, I do technically work with soldiers who have lost their limbs, but they didn't lose their limbs during active duty. They lost their limbs later on in life due to complications from some of these diseases and pathologies. Okay. So Brett says he went back to lanyard. And again, there's several. We have actually a suspension talk coming up in August 17th. I'm going to be doing a whole talk on suspension systems because I realized I've never actually, in the 4 years or 3 years I've done this show, I've never done a talk just on suspension systems, which I think is kind of important. I think a lot of folks sometimes confuse the shape of their socket with the suspension. And I think it's kind of important to understand the difference between the two and what you're looking at. All right. This question is one. Ash is like, can you just hold the picture to the camera? We can see. Let me see if I can hold it. I really stink at technology, guys. All right, let's see if we can do this. All right, so you guys see that? The top, the white button right there, that's the one-way valve. So she'll twist it into place, and then she'll push the silver button in the middle, and that'll expel the air out. So you do it once your limb is in the socket, you push the button, and you'll hear the air come out, okay? And that's how you know you're in the socket. All right. Next question. And this is a cool one. I haven't had this one. I haven't had this question, so I like these kind of questions. This one is from Laura. It says, "Hi, Cosi. I'm a physical therapist in a home health setting in North Carolina. We have a patient who is left above the knee and right below knee amputation. We have the issue that her left above knee prosthesis is externally rotating on heel strike, going into stance phase." And we're going to come back to that in a minute. "We thought because the socket was loose, we added socks and it's still doing it." Okay. And then she goes on and basically says, what are your thoughts on this? Okay. So guys, here's the cool part about this is why I love working in this particular specialty. It's obviously I love working with my patients and just seeing them be able to walk again. But from a clinical and academic standpoint, I love analyzing people's gait patterns. For me, and I had a nice talk last night at a women's support group for amputees. And I was explaining, for me, it's like a puzzle, just watching a person's gait pattern and watching all the different puzzle pieces and seeing which puzzle piece is missing, which puzzle piece has been rotated the wrong way and has to be rotated the correct way to click into place right. Okay. So this is something that I really love to do. And to me, no two people have the same gait pattern, right? And even after 19 plus years of being in this career, I'll see a gait pattern and sometimes go, let's see what's going on there and how we can fix that. Okay. So when I'm looking at an amputee's gait pattern, I'm thinking of a couple of different things. I'm thinking, okay, where is it coming from? Right? If the person has a gait deviation, which they do, because that's why they're in my clinic, right? If they have a gait deviation, is it coming from the prosthesis, right? Is it the alignment? Is it a liner issue? Is it a socket issue? Is it a fit issue? Is it coming from the prosthesis, or is it coming from the patient? Meaning, does the patient have weakness? Does the patient have balance issues, proprioception issues, range of motion issues, right? Where is it coming from? And usually it's coming a little bit from both sides, right? And this is where the team, working the team together between the prosthetist and physical therapist is incredibly valuable, because the physical therapist is going to see it from one set of lens and the prosthetist is going to see it from another set of lens. And between the two of them overlapping, usually you can really bring the whole picture together, okay? So for this particular thing, what this physical therapist is trying to describe, and I'll try to do it with this one, right? What they're saying is at heel strike, which is exactly that, when the heel hits the floor, that the foot is externally rotating, okay? I call it fishtailing. Sometimes people can understand that a little bit better. So what they're trying to say is, instead of the foot going down, let me do it this way. Instead of the foot going down nice and smooth like this, it's hitting and externally rotating and fishtailing out. Okay. This is a pretty common occurrence in my above the knee amputees, and there can be a couple of different reasons for this. Okay. So from a prosthetic standpoint, and I kind of like to organize it this way, right? So a couple of problems with the prosthesis can be the heel is too stiff, right? So if the heel is too stiff, right, then they can't push down into it and get their foot flat. And then the opposite can be true. If the heel is too soft, then it's the opposite's going to happen. The foot's going to slap down a little too quickly and a little too hard. But in the case of the foot being externally rotated and fishtailing out, if the heel is too stiff, right, then what's going to happen is the person's going to get stuck in this position. I keep turning it to the wrong way. And it's going to start to fishtail out like that. Okay. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. So the other part is that sometimes, and this kind of goes back to that square up thing that I just showed you, sometimes when a prosthetist is initially fitting a patient, right, they might put the foot set out just a little bit. And they set it out in we call it external rotation. So they'll externally rotate the foot just a little bit to give the patient a little bit more stability in the beginning. Okay. Usually that's what I find that happens. And the way I know that is because I'll have the person do square up, the exercise I just showed you, and their sound foot is nice and straight, but their prosthetic foot is going like this. Okay. So usually that's an indication to me, and I'll call the prosthetist and they'll tell me, yes, they set it that way to give the patient more stability in the beginning. And it's just a simple matter of having them set it back. Okay. Because usually if they're working with me, I want to teach them to have the balance with both feet in the same alignment. Right. And then again, some people might have their foot externally rotated because their sound foot is also slightly externally rotated. And the prosthetist may have been trying to match up both feet. Okay. So there's usually a little method behind the madness there, right? Another reason, let me see if I can find a good example here, right here. Okay. So we have an above the knee socket. Okay. So another reason, if the foot is fishtailing out, right, externally rotating when it hits the ground, it could be that the dimensions of the socket are just a little bit off. Okay. Specifically that it's a little too wide this way. Okay. We call it medial lateral width. So if it's a little bit too wide, if the socket is just a little too wide, the medial lateral, right? So from groin to the outside of the thigh, then that can cause a person to start externally rotating. Okay. That one can be a little bit tougher to fix because it involves having to actually like redo the socket sometimes. Okay, but that one's not usually as common. Usually the problem from a prosthetic standpoint is happening somewhere down in the foot, whether the heel is too stiff or it's just set out in external rotation. All right, here, let me just catch up with some of these comments. So Matthew, in terms of adding a pad to stop the rotation of the above the knee, again, that's usually actually a last resort for me, and also with the prosthetists I work with, meaning because usually the external rotation, it's usually happening because either the heel is too stiff, right? Or it's aligned in external rotation. So if you add a pad, you're not fixing any of those problems and you're actually adding a new problem by adding another factor into the equation, right? So before I add or suggest adding anything into a prosthetic alignment, usually I'm just like, wait, let's just stop and see what's going on and see if there's something that we can take away or something that can be adjusted within the system that's there before we start adding stuff on. Because whenever you add stuff on, again, you're adding more variables to the equation and then you're not going to be sure what's causing what, okay? So we talked a little bit about the prosthetic reasons a person might be fishtailing their foot out. Let's talk about some of the reasons that might be coming from the patient themselves, okay? Number one reason, weakness. Weakness, okay? So the shorter the limb, okay, the less control a person is going to have over their prosthetic leg, especially in those beginning days, right? So if they don't have strong gluteal muscles, if they don't have strong residual limb muscles, right? If they have a shorter residual limb, it's going to be really hard for them to be able to control that as their foot hits the ground, right? I know that happens all the time to my patients, and I'll check their alignment and alignment is fine and the heel is just fine because I'll push down on the heel myself with my weight. And if I can push down with my own body weight, then I know that the heel resistance is pretty good. Okay. So it comes down to muscle control at the person. This is why you have to learn how to use a prosthesis. This is part of the learning process, right? And this is where you'll see this, right? The other part of it is insufficient weight bearing into the prosthesis. So if the person's not putting enough weight into the prosthesis, that heel is not going to give, right? Then think about it, guys. Like for me, when I'm testing out a prosthesis, I mean, I grab the socket and I'm standing and I'm pushing down on it and I'm testing that foot and I'm like really putting my weight into it. And I'm not a feather, okay? So I really have to put my full weight into it to see these feet sometimes move, okay? So someone who's a new amputee learning to use this prosthesis, chances are they're favoring their sound leg, right? And they're favoring the parallel bars and putting their weight on the parallel bars or putting their weight on the walker. So they're not putting enough weight into the prosthesis to be able to activate and get that heel to give a little bit, okay? And then it's going to cause that foot to fishtail out, okay? Where did it go? Sorry, lost one of my notes here, okay? And then the other one, and this is probably honestly the most frustrating reason as to why the foot fishtails out. It has to do with how the patient dons the prosthesis. Okay, and for me, especially with some of these seal-in liners, the one that has the little, like the 3-ring seal-in liners that provide really great suction suspension, right? But sometimes if you don't put that liner on precisely the right way, if you rotate it just a little too much to one side or the other, then it throws off the alignment and the prosthesis starts fishtailing and doing all sorts of funky things. And it's kind of, it's frustrating because it means that the person has to take off their socket, take off their liner, put it all back on again, right? Do the whole alcohol spray, get everything back on again after they just spent 10 minutes doing it just prior, right? But it really makes a difference. And it's one of those things where I tell my patients, especially if they do have, one of these specialized liners, that if they don't take the time to put it on properly the first time, it's going to cause a bad fit for the rest of their day. Okay. So it's one of those things. Let's see. Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to catch up with some of these comments here. Oh, thank you, Matthew. Oh, Tammy, my pleasure. Okay. So guys, these are just, little things here. So we talked about the reasons from the socket or from the prosthesis where the foot might be aligned in external rotation. The heel might be just a little too stiff, right? From the patient standpoint, weakness, muscle weakness, right? That you don't have the muscle control to get that foot to land properly and to go through the motion of plantar flexion, right? Of going into that full foot on the ground motion, right? And then also the weight bearing into that prosthesis, right? And guys, this takes time. This is not something that is learned in one treatment session. There are some treatments. I remember that this one gentleman, he was just the sweetest man. He was 94 years old, right? 94, above the knee amputee. And this is what was happening to him. And, I talked to his prosthetist who is now retired, was an amazing prosthetist. So I knew the heel was not too stiff because I knew this prosthetist was going to pick the right heel stiffness for him. It was basically that because of his older age, right? He didn't have the confidence and the strength and the balance to put his full weight into that prosthesis. And it actually took us 2 to 3 sessions of working on it constantly. And I had him in the parallel bars, going from heel strike to toe, and having him really do a lot of weight-bearing exercises on his prosthetic side. It took about 3 sessions for his brain to finally accept it and for him to stop fishtailing out with that foot. Okay, so it is a bit of a frustrating gait deviation, but it is something that can be worked through. All right, what else we got here? Yeah, and if your socket is loose, Marianne, it's going to fishtail out. So usually the easiest thing to try to troubleshoot is, okay, let's add some socks. If you feel like the socket is loose and it's like fishtailing out, the easiest thing is, well, let's add a sock 1 ply at a time just to see like, okay, can we fill in that space and make it a little bit more secure, right? Next thing is check the alignment, right? Is one foot going this way and the other foot is going that way, and why is it going that way? And, give the prosthetist a call and have a conversation. Okay. All right, let's see. Sandra says, I can feel my femur moving as I walk. Oh boy, that's a big one. It's a very, again, another very common one in the above the knee amputee. So, and by the way, thank you to Click Medical for sending me this demo because I love having demos that I can use and demonstrate to you guys. Okay, so when it comes to the above the knee prosthesis, right, the important thing of getting a good fit is to have a bony lock, right? So the femur, right? Come here, Bob. When the femur is cut and transected, right, it doesn't have the lower part of that leg to anchor it down anymore. So it's basically just floating around, right, in that soft tissue. So when you put it inside the prosthesis, there's nothing to really, behave, Bob, there's nothing really to lock it in place, right? So the prosthetist has to, with their magic of engineering and mechanics, has to create a way to secure, okay, that femur. And usually that's how it's being done. There's pressure here on the outside. This is the outside part, right? And then this is the groin area, okay? And then there's pressure here to help keep it secure, right? And when you're pushing on these two ends, right, that femur can't move. Now, what happens a lot with our above the knee amputees is they get what's called, feels like a bell clapping, where the femur inside is like ding dong, like the little ringer in the bell where it just kind of bell claps back and forth, right? That indicates that it's not stable enough inside of there. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Part of it can be just the socket is not stable enough, right? That it needs more stability. Sometimes when we try to trim down these lines for comfort, we lose some of that stability, right? The other part of it is that there might be something going on here that's just not secure and stable. And a lot of patients will complain that on the outside bottom part, we call it the distal lateral end, the outside part of their femur starts to develop a pressure or a pain. And usually they'll point to me somewhere around here, okay? The other side of it is, remember how I told you sometimes there's a prosthetic reason and then sometimes there's the patient reason. So every once in a while I'll get a patient and I'm like, okay, I know that's a good socket. I know it's a well-made socket because I know the prosthetist who made it. And you seem to be wearing the right amount of socks. Let's test your glute strength. And bingo, they'll have glute weakness, right? So if the glutes are not strong, right, and they're not holding, think about it this way. If someone just comes up behind you and squeezes your butt cheek, right, that's how your glutes kind of need to be acting so that they can hold the femur in place and prevent it from flip-flopping back and forth. Okay, so it's a combination of stability in the socket and glute strength. All right. I always have such great analogies. Johnny, dude, there you are. I've been waiting for you. All right, let's see. I draw a straight line down from my short socket with a magic marker. Yeah, and it's called a plumb line, actually. It's one of the oldest methods that we use. And actually, I still utilize a plumb line every once in a while myself. So it's a kind of a line. And actually, some people, I'm actually in the market. I'm still looking for a vintage plumb line. I really, really want to get one. I haven't been able to find one. I want to get a vintage plumb line. And it's basically like it looks like a weighted fishing line. So you know how you have your fishing line and you have your weights at the bottom when you go fishing? I like to go fishing. So it kind of looks like that. And what the prosthetist and the physical therapist sometimes used to do is they would put it right by the person's body and just see where that line fell in alignment with their body. And depending on where in that line your body is will tell you a lot about the alignment of the individual. So that was just kind of the old-fashioned way of checking alignment in a patient. And I think it's actually still pretty accurate, but I'm kind of old school in that regard. Let's see. Chuck says, how do you know if the liner is on precisely right? Oh boy, if I had a nickel for that one. So I know it's on precisely right, and there's a frog sitting right on my window. Sorry, squirrel, just got distracted there. You'll know the liner is on precisely right because the socket feels like it's on right. Usually when I'm tipped off to something's not right with the liner is my patient will stand up and they're just like, something doesn't feel right. I feel twisty, or I feel like I'm being twisted, or I just don't feel right. Okay. And then with experience, if it happens, the patient immediately identifies and says, oh, my liner's not on correctly. But usually if I'm troubleshooting with a patient, I'm just like, I'm getting nowhere. Then I'll say, okay, reboot. Let's take everything off. Take off your socket, take off your socks, take off your liner, and let's redo this. And I will put the liner on, textbook style and put everything back on again. And if everything works out after that, then that's how I know. I'm like, okay, that liner was probably rotated just a little bit. And for me, this typically only happens with my above the knee. My below the knee, it's a lot easier to don the liner on properly. And the reason is with the above the knee, you just have that much more soft tissue, right? you have that nice beefy thigh tissue, all those muscles in there, and it's all kind of moving around a whole lot more. In the below the knee, there's not as much soft tissue going on there. So it's a little bit easier to kind of just put that liner on the right way. So it's kind of part science, part art. Okay. And again, it's practice. So once I've identified like, okay, this is a kind of a tricky liner fit for this individual, then I just make sure that every time they put that liner on, that we are following the P's and Q's. And here's something that of course, I don't have a liner. I need to get one of my prosthetists to send me a liner. Okay. So with the liner, you know how you're told to turn it all the way inside out, right? And then the bottom part, you put it on the very bottom of your residual limb, right? So for an above the knee amputee, it's very easy to identify the bottom of their residual limb. But for an above the knee amputee, you have a very wide base, right? And then you have all that soft tissue that's moving around. So it's kind of a moving target sometimes. So I'll try to go by landmarks. If the person has like a particular freckle, or if they have a part of their scar, and I'll say, okay, we're going to put the center of your liner right on that part of right underneath the scar right there. And we'll try that. And if it didn't work, then the next time we'll just take it a little bit over to the side of that scar until we find the right positioning. And if it sounds like a pain in the neck, it is. Sometimes it can take you a few tries to do this. And then let's add into it that your residual limb is changing, right? So it really is a moving target. Sometimes the patient will come in the next treatment, and because they've been working and doing all the exercises that their therapist told them to do, their limb has started to shrink a little bit more, and that landmark changes. Okay. It's part of the learning process. And if there's anything you take away from this crazy answer of mine tonight, is it's normal to have to troubleshoot this several times. But if you keep practicing, you're going to figure out this is how it feels right. And this is how I have to put it on every time. Hey, Benny, there's my rock star right there. Ooh, that's a good one. Thank you, Jeff, because I do tell my patients to do this. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff says, when you've had a great day with your prosthesis, right, look in the mirror before you remove your liner. Take a picture of what the positioning of the liner looks like, and then use that photo as a blueprint for putting it on every time. And Jeff, you're absolutely right. And for me, I usually use the patient's landmarks. And what I mean by landmarks is a scar, a freckle, a wrinkle, just something that's always going to be on their body, right? And it's always going to be there. And we'll say, okay, if this is what it feels like to feel good. And I use this technique also when my patients are learning how many socks to put on, right? Because sometimes it's really hard to know, do I put on more? Do I take them off? When we find that right fit, I tell my patients, take a mental picture of what it feels like, because this is the way, if it feels good and comfortable, this is how it should always feel, okay? And that's how you know. Keeping in mind, Jeff, that people, especially those who are new to being an amputee, their limbs will change day to day, right? But they just always have to think about, this feels comfortable now, and this is how I want it to feel every time I put my prosthesis on. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, Marianne says, when I feel like I have it on perfect, I make a permanent marker line down my leg and on the liner. Funny story, I had one lady, and oh my goodness, we had so much trouble with her liner because she kept losing weight and losing weight, and I swear she was going to disappear on me. So of course, her above the knee residual limb, it was just changing. Every week it was changing. And she had one of those, the seal-in liners, right? She said, when we finally got the right positioning, she said, I'm going to go get a tattoo, and I'm going to tattoo the spot right where I'm supposed to put it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't do that, because next week it might change again. So don't tattoo yourself just yet. But it was just kind of funny that she was just like, that's it. I'm getting a tattoo. We're going to put a tattoo, and X is going to mark the spot right there. Benny did a 10K in an hour, 48 minutes, 30 seconds. Strong work. Oh my gosh, that's amazing, Benny. That's awesome. Congratulations. Thank you, Winston. No, I had very good mentors. That's right. Well, little postponement there, Eric. Little postponement there. We'll tell you about that later. All right. Scott says, I feel like I'm standing on a pole and not a foot. A left below the knee. This causes me to sway when standing still. Any suggestions? Well, the first thing that just kind of comes to mind, Scott, is what size foot do you have? Is it the same size as your sound foot? And I know this might sound kind of ridiculous, but believe it or not, I've had people come in often sometimes where their prosthetic foot is not the same size as their sound foot. Now, sometimes this is done on purpose. So, for example, if a person is a size 9, the prosthetist might give them like the equivalent of a size 8.5. And the reason is because it's easier for that person to get their 8.5 into their size 9 shoe so that they don't have to go out and buy, mismatched shoes, right? So sometimes that's the reasoning. Sometimes the prosthetist might make a mistake. And that happens. We're all human. Okay. So Scott, I would just say find out what is the sizing of your prosthetic foot compared to your anatomical foot. And then the second thing you might want to consider is the alignment. Again, is the foot set too far back? Is it set too far forward where it's not right where it needs to be? And it gives you that impression that you're not putting your foot flat down all the way, when you're standing on the ground. Okay. And then remember how I told you guys there's a prosthetic reason, and then sometimes there can be a person reason. Okay. And your reason, Scott, might be is if you're not tuned into your proprioception. If that has not been developed again, that could be a reason why you're feeling like you're standing on a pole and you're not really steady. And again, going back to that square up exercise that I said in the beginning is a really great way to test that out. But Scott, I would give your prosthetist a call and just have that conversation with him or her and find out, why could this be happening? Tate, yes. So my favorite, Tate asks, any good resources for learning to fall with a prosthesis? Number one, your physical therapist. That is something that your physical therapist should be teaching you how to do if you are a candidate. Okay. So I've been very careful over the years when I talk about this. Not everyone is a candidate for learning this skill when they're in physical therapy. And here's what I mean by that. Okay. When I have someone come in who's a new amputee, usually I'll try to find out, in my assessment, I'll try to find out what was their life like prior to amputation. Because when I learn about how functional they were, what their mobility was like, that gives me a really good indication as to what are reasonable goals that I can expect from this patient, right? In working with them. So if a person tells me, I lost my leg in a motorcycle accident, but before that, I was active, I was doing sports, I was walking around independently, not a problem, then I'll think to myself, okay, so it's a reasonable goal that this person should be able to learn how to get up and down off the floor, right, on their own. Okay. If it's someone who comes to me and says, I am a 70, and I'm just picking the numbers, 70-year-old individual, and I haven't walked for the past year because I've had this huge venous ulcer on my foot. And that's what led to my amputation. And even prior to my amputation, whatever little bit I walked around, I only kind of walked around a few steps with my walker. That person is not going to be someone I might necessarily teach how to get up and down off the floor. Okay. I might teach them other strategies in terms of, okay, this is what you need to do if you do fall down, right? And other safety strategies that we can put into place. Okay. So that's the thing I would tell you guys, have this conversation with your physical therapist. Now, granted, okay, there are a lot of PTs out there who don't want to teach this skill because it's a little scary to teach and they don't know how to teach the skill, especially if they're not used to working with amputees. Okay. But have that conversation with your physical therapist. In the meantime, Mission Gate is a wonderful organization. I just put that name into the comments section. Okay. Mission Gate is a wonderful organization. They have an amazing YouTube channel. You might even see me there on a couple of videos, right? And they have a wonderful YouTube channel. One of them is how to get up and down off the floor. Okay. But again, this is something that if you're going to try doing this, you need to do it in a safe environment, guys, right? Because once you go down on the floor, you better hope you got a way to get back up again. Just saying. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so Jeff says, Jeff, are you a prosthetist? Jeff says adding a pad just proximal the distal end of the femur, right? So adding a pad here between the flexible liner and the hard socket. This can help stabilize the femur if you're seeing that pressure on the end of the femur. So he's referring to when the bell clapping movement is happening that we were talking about, and the person feels the pressure on the outside distal lateral end. Yes, sometimes a prosthetist might decide in between the flexible liner and the hard socket, and they might put a little bit of padding in between the two down in this part to cushion the femur. Okay. And, we've done that. I've suggested that on occasion, for some of my patients. But what I find, Jeff, is that because whenever you put something into a socket, right, you're creating another added pressure. So what I find is that the patient will say, yeah, it felt good for the first few minutes, but then the more I walked, then I started feeling even more pressure. So again, it goes back to if their glutes are weak, okay, and occasionally one of my prosthetists, and I love working with my prosthetists here in Tampa, guys, let me just put that out there. I'll say to the prosthetist, I'm like, that's glute weakness. That's me. Send them back to me, and we're going to get them strong again, because it doesn't matter how much padding you put in there. If their glutes are not strong, they're going to continue to bell clap out, right? It has to come from both sides. So, it's a quick fix to put that little padding down on the distal end. But what I find in the long run is the person keeps telling me, nope, it's still hurting. Nope, it's still hurting. And then I'll ask them, have you been doing those exercises to strengthen your glutes that I gave you 6 months ago? And they say, no. And I go, well, then you're starting to notice that weakness, and it's going to keep happening until you get it strong again. So, yeah. Freckle fit. I like that, Jeff. I like that. So Chuck says we are trying to figure out if this is a liner problem or the injury from an auto accident we had directly after receiving the liner and the fixed leg. Yeah. Yeah, so Ashley says, I have a custom liner and it truly is like a puzzle to put it on. I have a pretty deep invagination at the end of my residual limb, so the liner has to be put on just so. And you're absolutely right, Ashley. If there's an invagination in there, it depending on how deep it is, do you open it up just a little bit and then put the liner on, or do you make sure it's close to tight? Yeah, you've got to experiment, and then everybody's just a little bit different. Do people use socks with the Revo Fit? Okay. Yes and no. Okay, so the way the Revo Fit, and guys, this is an adjustable socket, and this is a demo socket, so that's why it's got all of the BOA dials on here. Typically, it won't have that many dials, okay? But the whole point, and let me get a good one here. Okay, so as you can see, this one's got the panels on it, right? And let me make sure I got the right one for it. Okay, so you click it in, and then it tightens up. I don't know if you could see that, appreciate that, but now it's all nice and tight and snug. And you can tighten it with a panel, or if your prosthetist decides to put in what's called a gap design, and then there's another one called the hinge design. So the adjustable socket can accommodate up to 10-ply sock. Okay? So just some common core mathematics, right? If you are someone who fluctuates 15-ply a day, right? So I have one guy that I know that he starts off his morning wearing 5-ply. At lunchtime, he's up to 10-ply, and by the end of the day, he's up to 15-ply. So if he had one of these sockets on, right, all he would have to do is tighten up the dial, okay? And then maybe around late afternoon, at that point, he would have to add on 5-ply, okay? But he wouldn't have to wear 15-ply of socks. He'd only have to wear 5-ply. Most people I know that have a relatively, a limb that fluctuates a little bit throughout the day, right? They usually want to keep their fit certainly under 10-ply. So something like this socket is great because they just put the liner on, they put the socket on, and that's it. That's all they got to wear. So, but yes, I mean, if you're shrinking and you've shrunk more than the equivalent of 10-ply, then yes, you could theoretically put a sock on with this. Yes. Oh, Hilaire says, any suggestions on how to talk to small children about limb loss and not freaking them out? Oh my gosh, Hilaire. I am so happy that you gave me that question because I have with me, guys, check this out. Roxy Rue. Okay. If you're watching social media, you've seen me posting about Roxy Rue. Roxy is a little tripod dog. And my colleague, and now one of my friends, Hillary Sussman, she's a physical therapist. She wrote now 2 books, and I know it's going to turn into a lot more on the adventures of Roxy Rue. So, Roxy is actually her dog. And as you can see, Roxy here is an amputee dog. And it's a beautiful series of books. My kids have been reading it here. And it really does a beautiful job of just explaining, what it is to have an amputation and limb loss in a child's vocabulary. And if you go to her website, adventuresofroxyrue.com, she's got a lot of beautiful resources. She's got like coloring pages, lots of really great stuff. I'm going to put her name because if you guys aren't following her yet on Instagram, I think her handle, hang on guys, I'm going to look this up because like I said, she's doing some really beautiful things. And I always like to support folks who are, give me a second guys, be patient with me. Thank you. Okay, yes. So here's her handle, Adventures of Roxy Rue. Okay. So go there on Instagram and on Facebook and you'll find her stuff everywhere, her website. She's got this beautiful dog. So Hilaire, I have 4 kids of my own. And when I really opened up my clinic, my kids have always been very science minded. My husband's also in healthcare. So we've always had like kids books in the house about anatomy and biology. And we talk about this stuff at the dinner table. So my kids have they're very familiar with the human body and everything in medicine, right? So when I opened up my clinic, right, part of the reason I opened my clinic is because I have 4 kids and I had to have a job that I could have my kids with me, right? So I would take them to my clinic especially during summer breaks. They would come with me, and they would hang out in the back rooms, but they would come and talk to my patients. And I always encouraged that. I wasn't, shy about telling them, no, don't talk to my patients. No. I'm like, no, my children need to see what it is that I do. And I wanted them to develop those social skills as well. So obviously when my kids first saw it, they're just kind of looking and looking. And fortunately, I have really wonderful patients that don't mind curious children and their questions. So they would ask, what happened to your leg? And people would, they would tell them, well, my foot was very sick in the case of a diabetic ulcer. And they said my foot was very sick. And to make sure that I didn't die, the surgeon had to remove my leg. And now it's all better. They would see the scar and they'd see how it's better. And they would say, and your mom is teaching us how to use a prosthesis. And in the beginning, I told my kids it was like a robot leg because they couldn't pronounce prosthesis. So I would say it's kind of like a robot leg. Okay, so kind of like, Star Wars and C-3PO, because they would just things that they could associate it with stuff they had already seen in the movies, right? So we talked about it that way. And I've always been very frank and very open with my children in that regard. And I think in that way, my kids are very comfortable talking to people who look different, and they're not shy. If anything, now we're at the grocery store and we'll see an amputee walking around and my kids are like, look, Mom, what kind of a leg does he have? And I'm like, okay, guys, that person doesn't know that I work with amputees. So you'll be surprised at how kids are really able to process the truth. And it's a little shocking for them at first. I remember my youngest, when he was 4 years old, I can't remember where we were, but it was the first time he saw an amputee. And she came into the room and you could see her prosthetic leg. And you just see his eyes go like this. And you just saw this look of, honestly, it was a look of compassion in his eyes because he was just saying, oh dear, what happened to her? And you could tell that he felt, even at 4 years old, that he felt compassion because he knew something had happened, and, I pulled him to the side and I talked to him a little bit about it, and you could tell it affected him. It affected him to see that. And over the course of time, I explained to him, okay, she's better now. This actually was a surgery that made her better. And the leg that she's using is a nice, strong metal leg, and she's able to walk and she's able to do all these things. But it was interesting to see that even at that young age, what an impact seeing an amputee made on him. And now, 4 years later, he's walking, talking, and has no problems. And, but again, I think for me with kids, just share it with them, share the truth with them. And you'd be surprised at how much they're able to really understand and process. Let's see. Thank you, Jeff, for that concession. I appreciate that. As a double above the knee amputee, Marianne, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. I've taught 3. I will say I've taught 3 double above the knee amputees in my career how to get up and down off the floor. I won't lie, Marianne, it required a lot of upper body strength. And the 3 of them were men. That they had the strength to hoist themselves up into the wheelchair or pull themselves back up into the chair from the ground. And even with them, I had to start off just by having them push themselves up onto a small step to build that strength up. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Not impossible, but it's tough. Let's see. Yes, I know. Winter the Dolphin was always that was a movie that I watched early on with my kids so that they could see, and I would take them before Winter passed away. I took them to Clearwater Marine Aquarium, and we were able to see Winter on several occasions with her tail. Theo says, my girlfriend's name is Roxy and I go by Rue, short for Rudy. Well then, Theo, you need to come get one of these books. Honestly, guys, they're so cute. They're so cute. They're so wonderful. And what I love is Hillary, the gal who wrote these books, she has a lot of teachers who buy these books and bring them to their classroom. And she's even had some children who are amputees take these books into their classrooms to read to their classmates. And I think it's just a wonderful tool to get that conversation going. Let's see. Jeff says, if you have children, hit up your prosthetists and see if they will go to your kids' school and present about prosthetics and educate more kids about what a disability is. Yes, it's career day. Like every school has a career day, totally has a career day. And I'll bet you, I promise you, if you arrange in your kid's school to have a prosthetist walking in with a bunch of prosthetics legs, they're going to be the most popular talk that day. Promise you. Tammy says, yes, that's what I told my 4-year-old granddaughter about a robot leg. Yeah. And it's just the easy way to explain it to them. I think sometimes we get so caught up on making sure we use the right words and the right definitions and the right this and the right that. So I think just sometimes the simplest way. And then as my kids got older, I would say, okay, so the grown-up word for robot leg is prosthesis. Okay. And then they figure it out. Matthew says, I'd rather educate the children rather than having them scared to approach me. Yeah. And I appreciate that when I see, when I see parents who they're not embarrassed about their kids' curiosity, and it's tough because as a parent, you want to make sure your kids aren't offending anybody, all the kind of, the normal societal concerns. But it's, and part of it is I've kind of, especially now that my kids are getting a little bit older, if they want to approach someone who has a prosthesis, usually I tell them, give them a compliment about their prosthesis. Tell them what a cool design they have on their socket and see if they want to open up the conversation with you that way. And if you notice that the person doesn't want to talk to you, then you just say, okay, have a nice day, and you move on, Let's see. Marianne, you are a rock star. Jeff says, I was giving a talk to 4th grade. I talked about the different amputation levels and drew them on the whiteboard. The kid in the front row had a crazy look on his face after I drew them. It's shocking. I mean, think about it, guys. Yeah, it is. And who takes the time to explain this to a kid, So it's kind of, he says, I don't understand. I don't see any baloney. Best response ever. That's good. I like that. I love that. No, and I remember I did a show once where I told, I asked people, I go, what is the response that you give folks when they tell you when they ask you how you lost your leg? And we'll have to do a whole nother show for that because I love some of the responses were priceless. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show tonight. Guys, if you guys don't mind, whether you are a prosthetist or an amputee, head over to my Strong Body. Okay, Strong Body website there. I've got all of my videos. I got the video I showed you tonight. I've got both of my books. I now have some prosthetist clinics that are using these subscriptions and handing them out to their patients, which I am so excited, so excited, so excited to see that happening. So guys, feel free to take this to your prosthetist and say, hey, would you like to have this in your clinic? So just putting that out there. All right, guys, keep in mind that for the next, how many days are left in April, I will be going live every day. Every time you share one of my videos, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, your name is going to go into a raffle. And at the end of the month, I am giving away a Strong Body book and a Strong Body annual subscription to one lucky individual. All right, guys, with that, I'm going to leave you next week. Put this in your calendars, put it on the alarm on your phone. Next week, I've got Dr. Dumanian from TMR Nerve coming back, and he's bringing Joe Kleben, who is part of the U.S. Paralympic team, and we're going to talk about TMR. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel, be there or be square.